Hey guys, welcome to Cashcroft TV. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. Thanks for watching another episode on ancient Greek and Roman history. Today we will be doing Pyrrhus and Caius Marius. You might notice that the spelling here for Caius Marius is with a C rather than a G. Gaius Marius, as you might find it most commonly on the internet. That's because I'm using Arthur Clo's edition of Plutarch's Lives, which I would argue is the most correct, just because of his critical acclaim. But regardless, that's the spelling I've chosen. Same thing with Aemilius Paulus. I know online they often have two L's. Aemilius Paulus in Arthur Clo's edition has one L, so that's the way I did it. So it's not an error, it's quite intentional. So without further ado, let's begin with Pyrrhus. So we kind of go back in time a bit here. I know we were sort of jumping forward with some of the more recent lives, but Plutarch didn't write these necessarily in order, so we're back into the 300 BCs. So Pyrrhus was actually a descendant of Achilles. Many of the kings actually across Greece were descendants of Achilles, and he was one of them. So he was actually the heir to the Molossian throne of Epirus. However, his father Aecidas was lost his throne to Cassander, and Pyrrhus was at risk of being probably killed or something because he was heir to the throne. So they ran away from the city. They brought with them a woman to take care of him and a couple servants, but they come across this river and they weren't able to cross it, so they put a letter saying that he was heir to the throne of Epirus, and they either threw it with a rock or threw it in it with a javelin across and told them. And it was a stormy day, and they sort of built a path across and carried Pyrrhus over. While there, he meets this king called Glaucias, Glaucas, who kind of wasn't sure whether or not what to do with this kid, because he knew having him would put him at risk, because Cassander would be very, very angry and might try to kill this kid or even start war with him. But it is said that either Pyrrhus tugged on his robe and started climbing up on his leg and sort of won the affection of Glaucus, and or he started climbing up on an altar, which kind of proved that he was a sacred child, which also potentially won the affection of him. But I kind of like the former one, where he sort of climbs up on his knee. I think it's just a little bit more, I don't know, just kind of more cute. But regardless, he raises him as his own child, and he gets along very well with his own children, and it was a good thing of him to do. So at the age of 12, he sort of starts developing into a sort of aggressive-looking child. Plutarch says he had, in the air of his face, had something more of terrors than the augustness of kingly powers. So he was not like our Alexander, where he was sort of more of a elegant, or Aristides, elegant leader who was obviously a very threatening and menacing looking guy. He also notes that he had not regular teeth, but one continuous bone with small lines in between. And I thought it's kind of a strange thing to comment on. And I thought about in Tolstoy's novel, Anna Karenina, he keeps commenting on the character Vronsky's teeth, who apparently had very tight together her teeth. And I kind of thought about it for a bit. I even looked up online why he keeps talking about this guy's teeth, because it obviously isn't a sign of beauty or anything. But the common consensus online is that it's sort of like a horse's teeth, so it's very animalistic. And that's kind of how the character Vronsky is in Anna Karenina. And that's kind of how I think they thought of this guy. He was more animal-like. He was very aggressive, and he kind of shows that through his military endeavors and political career. So nonetheless, at the age of 12, with the help of Glaucias, who is a great adopted father of his, helps him take back his throne of Epirus. but unfortunately he only holds it for about up until the age of 17, so he's 12 until 17, just a few years. He goes off to the wedding of one of his adopted brothers, and he loses the throne again to Neoptolemus II, who's sort of like his rival throughout his younger years, and he takes back his throne. So he's pretty upset that he lost it again. So then he sort of starts getting involved in the succession wars. So after Alexander the Great passed away, there was a lot of land, and they didn't really know who was going to control it all because no one really had the same leadership or same clout that Alexander had. So he starts off fighting for this guy named Demetrios, and unfortunately, through some dispute, he becomes a slave of Ptolemy II. Ptolemy the First, actually. His son was Ptolemy II. But it said that Pyrrhus was super good at pleasing or winning the affection of those superior to him, and he ends up marrying the guy's daughter. So not only was ridded himself from slavery, he actually managed to gain a lot of political power down there. So yeah, he marries the daughter, and eventually they help him to return to Epirus and win the throne. So for a while, him and Neoptolemus II sort of share the throne of Epirus, which they're actually both cousins and both related to Achilles, and they're actually both related to Alexander the Great on their mother's side, and also on Alexander's mother's side as well. But Pyrrhus sort of tries to co-lead the place, and he doesn't really start anything or start any troubles, but Neoptolemus sort of proves to be very tyrannical and very corrupt, and he tries to poison Pyrrhus. Pyrrhus is fortunately told about this, and he doesn't drink the poison, and he waits it out to see kind of what Neoptolemus does. And Neoptolemus is super cocky and starts telling people. He even tells his wife, and this really aggravates people. And when they finally find out that Pyrrhus was not actually killed, he kills Neoptolemus himself. So then he becomes king of Epirus, which was rightfully his by birth. He does some pretty good things. He's a pretty good leader. He fights against some neighboring places and annexes, grows the state. He moves the capital. He establishes a religious capital, Dodona. He creates a 17,000 person theater. He creates 4 annual athletic games each year to sort of instill national pride. Once his wife unfortunately dies, who he actually had a very good relationship with, he has 2 other marriages with other very politically powerful women, which sort of wins him both power in the area and grants him some good and strong heirs as well. So he ultimately, the people start calling him, after succeeding in so many battles, the Eagle. And he reflects when they call him the Eagle, he says, "How should I not be with your arms as wings to sustain me?" So he's kind of humble and such a great compliment. But the Eagle is also the symbol of the next life we will be talking about today, Caius Marius. So that's one of the similarities here. But either way, also he had 3 sons by his 3 different wives, and they also a testament to his character. They all asked him who is going to have his land, or how is he going to divide up the land, and he says, not by the lot decide, but with the sword heritage divide. So he was kind of harsh to his children, and he kind of valued their warlike abilities rather than their character, and he kind of wanted them to duel it out. It is said, as kind of already revealed, he was very good at pleasing those above him. He managed to win the affection of Glaucias when he was in adoption. He managed to win the affection of Ptolemy when a slave. He was always good at satisfying those above him, but he was very harsh to those below him, and in this case, that was his children. At one time, they asked who would it be. Antigonus was asked who would be the greatest soldier ever born or ever lived, and he reflected Pyrrhus if he lives too old. So that's just a testament to how good of a soldier he is. And yeah, that's about it for quotes. So anyway, Sicily starts. So Sicily, there's a town called Tarentum. It falls out of Roman control by sort of a legal dispute. The Romans weren't supposed to bring their boats into their land, and then it falls out of their favor. But the Romans start sending in their boats anyways, and Tarantians attack the Romans and sink some of their ships out of fear. So they call upon Pyrrhus to sort of protect them from the Romans. And this is at a time when the Romans were just starting to get powerful, so they weren't completely powerful. And he sees this as an opportunity to conquer Sicily for himself, because he sees Sicily as an amalgamation of many divided states and many different personalities and many different tyrants. So he sees if he goes up there and defeats the Romans out of there, he could potentially take the whole place. And what he does is, with the help of his ally Ptolemy, who comes in with reinforcements after, he sends 20,000 infantry, 3,000 cavalry, 2,000 archers, 500 slingers, and 20 war elephants up to fight the Romans, and plus thousands and thousands from his Ptolemy II as his aid. It is said either in the first battle, 7,000 Romans died and 3,000 of his own soldiers died, or as many as 15,000 Romans and 13,000 of his own. Either way, there's definitely greater victory on his side, but a huge sacrifice. In both cases, they kill thousands and thousands more Romans, but still a huge sacrifice on their own. That's why it's called a Pyrrhic victory, is one that is won but extremely costly. In a later war, they lose 6,000 and they lose 3,500 and kill 6,000. So also another Pyrrhic victory. He has this quote that kind of confirms what a Pyrrhic victory is. If we are victorious one more time with the Romans, we shall be utterly ruined. So it's like it's a win, but is it really a win if you have to lose so much, especially fighting the Romans? But when he did. So what he starts to get popular in Sicily, and he starts to win many of the states as he intended, and he gets two offers. He gets offered on one hand to be king of Macedonia, or he gets offered to be to fight the Carthaginians in Sicily. He decides that he wants to stay in Sicily because he sees it as a bigger opportunity than Macedonia at the time, and I think he also thought that he could always later take Macedonia if he wanted. So he heads out east to fight Carthage, and he ends up becoming king of Sicily. But he finds these Carthaginians very, very tough to fight, and he starts being sort of tyrannical with the Sicilian states, perhaps because he didn't really care for them because he was fundamentally Greek, and he started requiring lots of troops and lots of taxation on these people, and eventually they lost his support, kind of like Napoleon when he was heading towards Russia. He sort of lost the support of his own allies and turned it on him. So he had a huge defeat against the Carthaginians, and he lost almost his entire navy fleet. Meanwhile, he hears from one of his messengers that Rome had taken all the cities in Sicily except for Tarentum. So he heads back and is clobbered by the Romans, and he's defeated on both sides. He sort of foreshadows the coming Punic Wars, which are between Carthage and Rome, which we kind of discussed in some of the earlier videos. What a wrestling ground we are leaving, my friends, for Carthaginians and Romans. So he heads back to Macedonia, or back to Greece, pretty defeated. But even despite his tiny army, he manages to take the Macedonia throne back for himself, which is a good sort of last victory for him. And then later he is asked by a Spartan Cleonymus, who is royal blood and heir to the throne of Sparta, to attack Sparta and get the throne for Cleonymus. Kind of hard to trust Pyrrhus here. I'm surprised he does, but because Pyrrhus probably wanted the throne for himself. He just really wanted to conquer everything. But either way, he heads to Sparta and finds that they're much tougher than he believed, and he loses much of his army. So what he does is he sends in a sort of a scout troop into the city in disguise. But they find that they're just surrounded by tons of Spartans, and they get just clobbered and defeated. While fighting, a old woman, one of the mothers of a Spartan that he is attacking, drops a stone on him, paralyzing him. And upon seeing him dead, a guy named Pyrrhus sees him lying on the ground and is frightened and slices his head off. And that was the end of Pyrrhus. He always hired many mercenaries in his wars. He wrote many books on the art of war. It's interesting that they call it the art of war, not the science of war, just throughout history, because I think that is more what it is. But either way, that's for a different discussion. So, I think let's move on to Marius. We'll probably talk more about this guy in the comparison. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything, because there's a lot that goes on with this guy. But that's about it. I guess one thing, he did really revolutionize the fighting tactics at the time. He spread out the army into more sort of micro groups as to fill in gaps and to defend. And he also established this big roundish shield that he would keep to the sides that was later used throughout all Greek warfare. He was also one of the main inspirations for Hannibal. Hannibal, as previously mentioned, puts Pyrrhus as the second greatest general of all time, Alexander the first greatest, and humbly or unhumbly puts himself, Hannibal, third. So we'll take it that Pyrrhus is second best after Alexander. Maybe not. There's a lot of other good guys, but that's just Hannibal. So let's move on to Caius Marius. Another thing I was just going to say at this halfway point, I was reading a pretty tough textbook the other day, and I usually love reading, but it was just it was absolute grind to get through. But I kind of thought to myself, the faster or the better quality you get to the halfway point, the better you'll be overall. So I kind of confirmed this. I was doing a hike the other day, and also I was doing on the rowing machine. The faster you get to the halfway point, the momentum will carry into the second half and make it all the stronger. And this could be applied to anything. If we applied to a project, get to the halfway point, the second half will go through stronger. Aiming for the final objective is a lot more daunting than aiming for the halfway point. And by the time you're at the halfway point, you're already at critical mass, and the next part's easy. So, I just wanted to say that now. Hopefully you don't think of these videos as a grind, but I thought I'd mention that regardless. So, Caius Marius. So Caius Marius, Plutarch says that he came from a poor, laborious family. People criticize this and say, no, he didn't. He must not have. But, I think Plutarch is the utmost authority on this, and it's also it's a lot more motivating thinking of the person coming from a poor background than a wealthy background. Why disqualify this guy, especially if it is true? So either ways, he was known for his, Plutarch said he actually went to go and see a statue of this guy in Gaul, and it confirmed the roughness and harshness of character, more suited for camps than the city. So this was a very rough and tough guy. He was also very influential in being sort of leading towards Rome becoming an empire. We'll see that very soon. He was very, very sort of corrupt guy and practiced some really dirty politics that sort of led to the downfall of the Republic and led to quite a few civil wars. When he was young, it's said that he found 7 eagle's eggs in a nest, which is particularly uncommon because supposedly it's rarely does an eagle even lay 3 eggs. So even if there were 2 eagles in the nest having 7 eggs, is even more unlikely. So perhaps maybe there were 3 eagles in one nest to get to 7, or one eagle laid 4 and the other still got 3. So it was quite a phenomenon back then, and his symbol became the eagle. And later the symbol was also used for that of Rome. I see the mark of the Spartan legion here. The eagle is the symbol of Rome, which is also cool because it's also the symbol for Pyrrhus, as we discussed. And I think the eagle is a great animal. It's also the symbol of the United States of America. It's a very beautiful, particularly I like bald eagles. I think they're a pretty nice looking animal. But yeah, cool. So he supposedly, while young, he never studied any Greek. That's what Plutarch said. Plutarch was Greek. He was never into studying. He was very anti-religious. He said teachers themselves were little better than slaves. So he thought very poorly. He was one of the least educated or least interested in education individuals that are in all of Plutarch's lives. So it's very strange, and maybe it sort of foreshadows his ill character. Yeah, he proved himself as a soldier fighting for Scipio Africanus. So Scipio Africanus, if you've seen the previous videos, is one of the greatest generals of all time. I would say he was the guy who defeated Hannibal. Hannibal jokingly sort of admits that Scipio is slightly better, but he was the guy who defeated Hannibal, and he was really a guy who invested fully in the military. He was kind of like Pyrrhus in the sense that he would go accumulate huge amounts of debt and just go all out to defeat Hannibal, and that was sort of necessary to take on such an important leader as that. But anyways, he performed. Supposedly, he slayed a guy right in front of Scipio Africanus, winning his admiration and affection. At one point, in one of the tents, one of the generals asked Scipio, "Who will be the next great general in Rome?" And tapping Marius on the shoulder says, "Perhaps this man." So that sort of gained a decent amount of fame for the individual at the time, and it was quite a compliment coming from Scipio Africanus, who was probably the greatest general that just like besides political endeavors, the greatest general that Rome might have ever had. So it was quite a compliment. So the landowner, the guy who his parents, who were laborers, worked for, Metellus, takes on Marius as sort of a mentorship role, and he works as tribune under Metellus. Very soon into his career, he passes a bill that restricted the votes of great men in legal proceedings. So this was kind of a very populist thing to do, and he was very much criticized by the Senate. But even when young, this guy named Cotta opposed him and wanted to punish Marius for it. But very early on, he stood up to this guy and threatened to banish him, which earned him a lot of admiration amongst the Senate. He even opposed his own mentor, Metellus. And later, he fills the roles of aedile and praetor, and he serves as a general for Metellus too. And on countless occasions, he sort of defies Metellus, who's his mentor, which is kind of strange, but Metellus seems to maintain affection for him and keep investing in him, which is very, very uncommon, I think. As a kind of a testament to his toughness, there's a little anecdote. He apparently had a bunch of tumors on his legs, and he called the surgeon to cut them out, and while they were cutting out, he showed no pain. He said not to strap him down. He just took all the pain. And when he went to the second leg, he said no, the pain was too much. So kind of 2 points here. Firstly, it shows that he was able to take a lot of pain, but secondly, he knew when to stop. He knew when to stop, so he knew it was good for him. So, yeah, I thought that was a kind of cool anecdote. He married, so he started to grow in the ranks, and he married Julia, who was Julius Caesar's aunt. But at the time, this was prior to Julius Caesar ultimately becoming emperor of Rome and crossing the Rubicon. So they were, at this time, the Caesars were not as powerful, but they never really rose past the rank of praetorship. But still, it showed that he was rising in the ranks. Moving forward, he ultimately becomes consul. Metellus tells him that he should wait until Metellus' son was ready so that they could run together, his son and Marius, but he decides that he just wants to start, and he goes in early and he wins. He makes a lot of great reforms that were not only very populist but great for the future empire of Rome. At the time, there was soldiers needed to provide their own arms and armor to join. Also, they had to own a certain amount of land. Firstly, he got rid of these two rules. He lowered the land requirement and lowered the requirement of owning arms and armor. But ultimately, they didn't need to own land at all. And so this really shifted the dynamic of the army. So it was no longer upper-class individuals, but it was mostly poor people who were very hungry for power or for land. And they were very incentivized because the land that the Roman army conquered could potentially go to them. So it's said that the legions started to become more loyal to their generals than they did to the Senate. This ultimately led to the Roman Empire, where Julius Caesar takes over through the use of the army. So that was pretty cool. And this also drastically increased the quantity of soldiers. And this was necessary because there were a lot of barbarians threatening Rome at the time. And he managed to fend off many barbarians from all directions, and for this reason he was referred to as the third founder of Rome. At one point he gets a subordinate named Sulla, who later becomes his main rival. Sulla is also one of the lives recounted in Plutarch's Lives. But Sulla actually has some great achievements, but he takes all the credit for it. But Sulla is sort of humble in this, and he doesn't take it. One of the main wars that I'd like to recount is it was a Germanic war. There was 100,000 Germanic soldiers, and they, right off the bat, came early and slaughtered 30,000 Romans. But with a small troop of 3,000 soldiers, Marius manages to sneak up on them and defeat all 100,000. So sort of like a Pyrrhus victory, but just sort of from a different direction. But they lost a lot of soldiers, but they also defeated a great many. He ultimately becomes consul, or gets elected for consul 7 times. He actually dies prior to starting his 7th. But it's also coincidental because he found the 7 eagles' eggs, that he becomes consul 7 times. At the time, people were only supposed to run for consul once, and often even prevented from second times. But while he was off in Africa, he gets elected for his consulship 2nd time, even while not at home, and kind of pushing down that law that prevented people from running a 2nd time, and setting a precedent for him to win many, many more times. He sort of practices a lot of dirty politics. At one point, he gets fed up and he just exiles himself, which really upsets the Senate and upsets the people alike, but it sort of proves how badly they need him. Ultimately, Sulla eventually gets elected for consul, and Marius is very jealous, and he sort of does a dirty trick where he allows the individuals to erase their debt, the tribunes to erase their debts if they allow him to be consul. So he steals the role. Sulla's very upset about this, and Sulla, for the first time ever, he sees that he is the legally supposed to be consul, and he leads an army to attack Rome. So this was the first time ever that Rome was attacked by its own army. Ultimately, it gets attacked by Julius Caesar, who takes it over and declares himself emperor, thus thrusting the state into an empire rather than a republic, destroying the republic. But either way, in this case, I think Sulla was actually right to do it, and he is not considered wrong for this, and he attacks Rome itself. Marius uses the gladiators to defend Rome, but obviously they fail, and on many occasions he almost dies. He runs away and he's sentenced to death, but he actually doesn't end up getting killed. So back at under Sulla's leadership, he has Octavius at home, who is sort of pro the upper class, and Cinna, who was more populist and was against Sulla. So they're sort of having a conflict on their own, but while away in Africa, Marius built his own army and starts talking with Cinna, the populist, and he for the second time, not his second time, but the second time in Roman history, attacks Rome and attacks Sulla. He goes in and he kills Octavius, the guy who was working for Sulla, and he starts just what's called a 5 days of terror, and just starts massacring anyone who is loyal to Sulla. And he goes essentially crazy and kills countless people. It said that even people who didn't salute him would be just massacred. So this was really cruel. And whereas Sulla might have been right for invading Rome, he did it in a very wrong way, and set a precedent for Julius Caesar and the empire. But yeah, he starts going crazy. He starts drinking a lot. He starts thinking he's at a war, and eventually he sort of just dies. But yeah, he just sort of sets a precedent for the future. So yeah, I think that is it for Marius. I guess we'll go to the comparison. Actually, in Plutarch's Lives, he doesn't have a comparison, or at least in Arthur Close edition or anything that I've seen. There's no comparison for these two individuals, which I think is strange because they are both symbolized by the eagle, and it would have made very much sense. So I made one myself. So yeah, I guess in terms of similarities, they both had like insatiable ambition, where Pyrrhus he took on the Romans, and then he also wanted to take on Carthage. He wanted to take Sicily rather than just stay in Macedonia. He just really couldn't be satisfied. Same thing with Marius. He just, even at his death, he said he did not achieve all that he was capable of, which is sort of crazy because he would have been elected consul more times than anyone in history, and he pretty much took complete control of Rome and won many battles. So they were both insatiable in terms of their ambition, very much like Alexander the Great or Napoleon Bonaparte. They also were both successful in Pyrrhic victories, where they slayed many people and they ultimately won, but at the cost of many of their own troops. They both had great mentors. However, and for in cases where they might not have even deserved it. Glaucias supported Pyrrhus when he wasn't even his own son and at his own risk. Ptolemy supported Pyrrhus even when he was a slave. Caius Marius, his mentor Metellus, just kept supporting it. No matter how many times he defied him, he really didn't deserve this, but he kept supporting him, which is probably more of a testament to how great their mentors were than actually them. Or maybe they just foreshadowed their coming abilities. But yeah, they both had quite a few army reforms. They both built huge armies, and they both built great strategy too. Yeah, and they both had the eagle as a symbol, which we've already mentioned. In terms of difference, in the case of Pyrrhus, he always pleased the people above him. He always pleased like Glaucias and Ptolemy, the leaders of the time, for his own favor, but he was thought to be sort of harsh on his subordinates, whereas Marius was very much a populist. He would often defy his leaders. He even defied the gods. He was very anti-religious. That's also one of the comparisons too, but he was very much a populist, and he was pleased down. He won the favor of the army. He and he gave them a lot of power and a lot of land, and they were very thankful to him for that. As for religion, Pyrrhus sort of consulted the Oracle of Delphi, or Delphi. It's actually, I'm pretty sure it's pronounced. I actually went there when I was younger, but he was very religious, and he thought that he was sort of touched by the hand of God, whereas Marius wanted nothing of it and didn't even care. As for their negotiations with their rivals, Pyrrhus he sort of tried to cooperate with Neoptolemus until Neoptolemus ultimately tried to poison him, which he killed him, and rightfully so. Whereas Marius sort of had no intention of collaborating or working with Sulla, and they could, even when Sulla was his subordinate, he even took his credit. So yeah, that's it for Pyrrhus and Caius Marius. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you watch the next one. Thanks so much.